All right, we're back in the studio, and I'm with one of my favorite people and one of my favorite coaches, particularly because he focuses on probably one of the most important life and business skills you'll ever need, and that's communication. Welcome, Kyle.
Thank you. Glad to be back in the studio. I swear, Carm, every time I come here, you've bought more equipment, more lighting, more mics, so...
I know!
This is pretty awesome.
How do you like it?
It's good. I'm going to be absolutely using more of this.
Oh, good. Oh, my God. It's always fun to have you. And it's like, I'm like, why aren't you staying here like all day? But, you know, we're entrepreneurs and we have busy lives, so you're more than welcome to be here. We're literally in my... not my new studio, but my newly renovated studio that every week, new supplies come in. And one of the things about communication is really sharing your message. And, for me as a content creator, as an entrepreneur, and a public figure, it's important for me to make sure that I'm sharing my message and inviting people that also have a message to share and that want to help people with their communication, because communication is foundational for dating. As you know, I'm a matchmaker. What else is, what do people struggle with when it comes to communication for you in the corporate world, Kyle?
I think the biggest problem we're seeing is mostly in the career space right now. I'm hearing a lot of grumblings from individuals that absolutely found their dream job, love what they do, but don't like their boss. And that's really tough pill to swallow because there's so many great companies out there, great employees of said company, but it's the middle, not just the middle managers, but it's the leadership that is screwing things up. They're either over micromanaging, they're not communicating clearly to their staff on what they actually really want out of them. But here's the biggest thing that I'm starting to discover, is that managers and leaders use the same type of communication and dialogue with every single individual that works in the company. Now let me explain. Would you speak to a 6-year-old the same as you would speak to a 60-year-old? Would you speak to a 25-year-old Gen Z versus the same as a boomer? Would you speak to someone female versus male? See, this is the beautiful world of communication, and unfortunately it's starting to become a bit of a lost art, is because we are now so ingrained in technology that majority of modes of communication are done what I call two-dimensional, through text, email, Snapchat, Instagram messaging, Facebook Messenger. We're losing that face-to-face dialogue. Yes. Even like the ways of calling people are gone. People are like, why'd you call me? Just text me.
I know. I think that's a great point. I don't want to take off the point of what you said is, would you speak to a 6-year-old versus 6-year-old? Context is always important. But my first answer is no. I'm likely going to curb my communication because I am a professional communicator and I've worked many, many years with just people, that I try to communicate so that the person I'm communicating with has the ability to understand me and that I'm speaking at their level. So whatever that communication level is, for example, I'm very, very excitable. And for some people, being around my energy, Kyle can attest, is a lot. Yeah. Right? So, and if I can notice body language that's uncomfortable. Now, Kyle's a great communicator, so he will tell me, you're too much right now, or I need space, or I love you, Carm, but I can't stay here.
Or slow down, or
right.
Just
correct.
Let people gather their thoughts.
Sure.
And we can dive into that, the whole body language, dialogue, pausing, pacing, volume. Yeah,
so here's what people do, and I think you were trying to allude to that, is not only are they speaking incorrectly to the person, they're speaking for them, not to be heard. Because if you really want to be heard and listened to, because communication, someone once told me, I don't know where I got this, I can't remember, communication is in the listening, right? And it's also in making sure you both got the same message. Because I might be communicating to Kyle and different children even, and I'm saying something, but the message that was received could be completely different. And whose responsibility is that? The person who's giving the message. So part of that is the clarity. Did you understand what I need from you?
Yeah.
Right? So
it's the term I coined, question through conversation. And a lot of people, managers, salespeople, just general population, and I don't want to blame social media for this, but everyone now has a megaphone. And everybody needs to say, look at me, look at what I've done. How can I look like, and I often tell people, just pause. If you're in the sales world, you don't just start spewing out what exactly that you do. You need to find out who you're speaking to. What is the pain point or problem that they're experiencing? Then jump in and try to solve it. The three things I always say is, what is the problem? How are you going to solve it? And why should someone work with you? But you have to go in that order. What is the problem that this person or corporation, company, employee is currently experiencing?
right.
How, as the manager, the salesperson, the leader, going to fix this? And why they should listen to you. But what we've done now with social media is we've reversed the order. Everyone is so quick to be like, look at what I've done. So they're explaining the why they should use you. I've done this, I've worked with this person, they start name dropping, and I'm like, but what if that individual doesn't need help with that particular thing? You're screaming out of a megaphone with the person not actually listening. Mm-hmm. And this happens in the work world all the time. Bosses will come to their employees saying, I need you to do this, 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 and this. And instead of maybe explaining it in a way that female, that male,
it lands for them.
It works for them.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of broken communication because either managers are too direct, not direct enough, vague. Like, it's not so much the words you use, but the delivery of said words.
Oh, tonality is everything. Like, can you record that? Can you record that?
Yeah.
Like, I said the same thing.
Yeah.
But, like, based on the way I said it first or the way I said second, some people's listening turn right off, and I don't blame them. When you have somebody that's barking, and that's not the way that you receive information, and firstly, let's acknowledge that's not healthy communication. Mm-hmm. I'm guilty of that. I have children. I know that when I'm speaking calmly, and I'm not at a point where I'm like ready to blow up, that they are more prone to helping mommy because mommy's nice, right. And mommy asked nicely, and mommy wasn't barking and yelling. So, I love that. When you were talking about people, the thing that came to mind, I'm like, KYC. And KYC is the acronym for Know Your Client, which is what Kyle was saying. I would just add to what Kyle is saying, aside from the problem and how you're going to fix it and why I'll just add, and it's probably somewhere in there, what is the result you want to achieve? Because it's one thing to know the problem, it's one thing to know how to fix it, but what's the end goal? If people are results oriented and you truly understand that problem, and maybe it's in that problem understanding, can you actually, if you don't know the result or what that result really looks like, how many leads they want to get, how much money they want to make, whatever that is, I think that for me, coaching and working with somebody and leadership is also about being results oriented. And most managers and whatnot, if they think that results are going to happen when they just delegate, and they delegate irresponsibly and not follow up and know, did you understand that, right? So what are the other problems in leadership? If the fish rots at the head, right? And for a lot of people who place people in leadership positions, they're qualified. They're qualified on paper.
Right.
But they've never maybe seen them in practice. And all of a sudden, it's like everyone's going to work and they look, their heads are down. Like, you can see the leadership or the effectiveness of the leadership based on the environment of the staff.
Right.
Right? Are they wagging their tail going to work, or are they all disgruntled? And,
majority of employees will actually say they were on the brink or have quit because of the manager.
Yeah.
Which, unfortunately, a lot of times, which companies don't do a great job of either, is exit interviews. When people quit, why? They don't find out. And guess what? You see this revolving door of people coming in and out of that work group and the upper managers or the executive team don't figure out, okay, what is causing this problem? When in fact, it could be poor leadership from that middle manager. Now, I'm picking on middle managers, but ultimately they're the ones that are closest to the employees, and employees make up the biggest cohort of your workforce and ultimately drive majority of the results in your business. Yet the communication breakdown often happens between employees and the middle managers. But the middle, and I'm not, to give middle managers some credit, they have a very tough job. They now have to report to the senior executive team that have given them orders, but a lot of times, because executive leadership, the C-suites are very busy, their dialogue and their conversations with their staff, their middle managers, is often very tight. 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and then next thing you know it, the middle manager is still kind of confused.
Well, Kyle, what happens when you go to an organization, or maybe you haven't, maybe you have, and the leadership sucks at the senior management level? Like, the communication is faulted at the senior management level, and maybe there isn't HR. You know, because in many corporations,
startups, they don't have it.
The startups don't have it. And the issue with a lot of people in communication, number one, is unless somebody speaks up, or unfortunately something bad, something has to happen to a company, or their top person leaves, or someone just had it that day, they've been holding it enough. It's like this dictatorship, right? I'm just curious for your process, is there like a form that you take? Is there like, how do you help somebody when they don't know that they're the problem?
So I often do a bunch of exercises with my executive clients where I will run them through a bit of a storyboard, because again, in communication, storytelling is everything. If you don't believe me, a good movie with bad acting and good writing will supersede a terrible writing with good actors. So the storyline makes up for that. Now, that being said, I do have to have those hard conversations with those senior leaders. And you know what? They're in very powerful positions. But a lot of times, they didn't hire me for me to reassure them what they already know. That's doing them no service. They hired me to find out where the gaps are, where the blind spots are. So I come in with a different lens and explain to them, okay, could it be you? But this is the thing. I don't ever accuse people. This is the problem right now. We're in society, it's a lot of judgment. Whereas if you always just rephrase it with questions, it's not attacking.
Is it possible?
Yeah, but here, watch this. Watch this. If I were to say to a leader, they'll complaint will come back, oh, my staff doesn't listen to me. And I'll ask them a simple question. Is it one or two people in your work group? Say you have a team of 30 people. Or is it the whole work group? If it's the whole work group, the communication breakdown comes from the top. If it's one or two people of 30 people, then it's potentially those two employees. But it happens so often. I see it sometimes in my gym. I see it sometimes in the business world, where the leader or the manager gets super frustrated. Like, why is no one listening? And I often just said, maybe you didn't explain it clearly enough. And a great book that touches on this, it's by Jocko Willink, The Dichotomy of Leadership. And it's about owning everything. And it's so critically important that, own your faults, own your mistakes, own your ego too. That's the other, when you get into the senior and executive and C-suite, it's not so much of their ability, it's sometimes the egos get into the room. And now you have what I call the silverback gorillas battling each other to see who's got the louder voice.
Yes. As you are speaking and I'm listening, I'm also reflecting on the last time I was in a corporate environment, which was 2010, is when I say I retired from corporate life. I left to pursue entrepreneurship. And I worked in the dating industry, and we had 18 offices, multiple leaderships, lead managers in leadership, a lot of women. I was putting out so many fires, Kyle, because, she said, and then she said, he said. And when you talk about the listening, why aren't people listening? The first question I would probably be asking a coach is, there must be something in my communication that's not landing for people, or I would love you to sort of tell me. This is somebody who has to be aware. What is happening in my communication that is not driving these people to do their job, or whatever the case is? Because a responsible leader, a parent, anybody understands that communication is a two-way street. The minute you start saying it's their fault is when I know, then it tells you something, Kyle. All right, we have an uphill battle here, because the first step to communication in my mind and in conflict resolution is not having a fixed way of being. It's being open to understanding that I have a point of view and you have a point of view, and our views don't have to match. It's just, how do we get aligned so that we are on the same page, right? Because I've seen it in practice, in therapies where, for you, okay, are we seeing the same book? Are we looking at the same book? Would you swear that your cover has a title?
Yes.
We're looking at the same book, but I'm like, no, it doesn't. My title has a picture of Dr. Sanjeev.
Yeah.
Is it the same book?
Yeah.
It's the same book.
Yeah.
But my side looks totally different. And I'll tell you where I get this. I coach people in dating environments. How many times does I get feedback from both sides and I'm like, were these guys on the same date? Because the experience for both people is completely separate. Someone had a great time and the other person was miserable.
Right. And a lot of that comes from the perception of what we see and hear.
Yes, or what they're afraid of, what they're not expressing.
Right.
That's it too.
There is no one pain point or problem that is the crux of all of our communication breakdowns, but I will say the giant rise of technology has played a huge impact in that.
I agree.
The distraction of cell phones is getting unbelievably crazy. Our attention span is falling to like 5 seconds now. With the new release of Apple VR, like that's going to become an even more distraction. So it is fighting through that and just asking individuals, do I have your undivided attention? Here's another thing. Is now a good time to chat? Because a lot of times managers just barge in, hey, I need this done, and the person's in the middle of something, they're dealing with something, they can't be like, hey. Now, I get sometimes things are very time sensitive, but there's other times where managers just come in and bark orders, and I explain to them, that could have waited until after lunch. That could have waited, say, hey, can we schedule a 10-minute meeting or a 15-minute? That's the other problem that I've noticed in the corporate culture world, and this is from a person that lived in that corporate world for 14 years as a project manager, was just so much wasted time. Communication is an absolutely critically important critically important thing in business, personal life. But here's the other problem. If sometimes you don't set parameters,
yes,
the dialogue just runs rampant and it runs in a gazillion different directions. So when I often tell people, timestamp stuff. Our time is very sensitive and very important right now. So if you're a boss or a leader and you want to have a conversation with an employee, schedule it and stick to the timeline. If you know that the dialogue requires 25 minutes of their undivided attention, don't make the meeting 10 minutes. But also on the reverse, there was lots of times where I'd be in a meeting and it'd be an hour long, and I swear people were just there to waste time.
I'm laughing right now because the other day when Kyle spoke to me, and he practices what he preaches, and I'll give you a prime example. And he's here today because I've been trying to get him here forever, but he's finally here. But the other day he's like, Carm, we're gonna talk, but for the next minute, okay? We're talking about this. Do not veer off, and no, we're not going in that direction, because he knows me on a very deeper, I wouldn't say intimate level, but we're friends, okay? So he knows I have ADHD, and he knows that I like my mind is going like a squirrel. You literally told me, one thing at a time, Carm. No, you're not allowed to go there. But he guided that conversation, and he said, I have time for this dialogue, and we're talking about this right now.
Yeah.
As I have a tendency to say, but I'm hungry. I want to eat dinner, you know.
Whereas But that's just years of practice and training as a public speaker, as an individual that has coached and client a lot of people in the communication space. I've been on a plethora of stages across Canada and the US, and I will often tell people, we speak to respond. We don't speak to listen. And that is unfortunately a big problem. Like, this is why I think you and I have worked well in working the red carpets and communicating and doing events together, because we're bouncing it off each other. But in order to do that, we actually have to listen to what the other person is saying, not just in my head going, all right, what am I saying next? Completely ignore what Carm's saying.
I don't think we've ever had a fight yet.
We're both very easy, laid back people. But
No, I mean, but I'm looking forward to an argument with Kyle, because
you know
I know
I'm going to win.
No, it's not about win.
I'm going to throw facts and figures at you.
I will let you win.
I'm like a lawyer.
I will let you win, so that in reality I won because I let you win. Here we go. No, I'm not really interested in conflict, but I know, and I'm so confident that if we ever argue about something, we're going to come to a fast resolution, and we're going to both see each other's side.
Right.
You know,
and that's what's so important in communication.
It's so important.
I always tell people, managers, spouses, parents, put yourself in the other person's shoes in that moment.
Yes.
But you know how you do that? You ask questions. I'm just curious. Where is this anger coming from? Was it something I said? Was it something I did? Was it something that you... A lot of times, and this happens in relationships, that they end up fighting with each other because the other person had a bad day that brought it home.
Right.
And then took it out on the spouse, and the spouse thinks that they did something wrong.
Right.
When in fact, it's like, wait, what happened?
Right.
What truly happened? And this is a great question, and I know I've shared this one with you before.
Which one is that?
I often tell this to people, because as men, we try to always solve. That's our innate nature to do that.
Fix it. I can fix it.
So I often tell this to people. Do you want me to listen just to listen? Or do you want me to listen to solve? Because it's two completely different ends of the spectrum. One, I'm going to be listening for the problem so that I can come with a solution. The other one, I'm listening just so that I'm an ear for them. Because more often than not, especially with, I'm going to say women, they will want to talk, but you know what their number one complaint is? They're not heard. Because the guy is coming back with, oh, I can do this. Oh, why didn't you do that? Why didn't you? When in fact, she just wanted to just let some steam out. That was all. So I often tell people, where you listen from is critically important.
Well, you know, I'll share an example of what you're talking about, but where I was the guy, right? Because there were times or moments where I was speaking with my partner at the time, and they're the ones talking about their bad day or whatever, and I wanted to like solve the problem. And here's the thing, communication is a two-way street, but I didn't know, and I got upset and going, well, this isn't a conversation if I can't contribute. And I'm like, then why are you telling me your problems if I can't solve them? But I didn't, at that time, it wasn't told to me, or like, I just want you to listen, I don't want you to solve. Right?
Well, and
then, you know what I said?
Yeah.
And this is the air, I'm telling one on myself. Well, there's a wall you can do that to. It's right there. Like, if I can't contribute, there's a wall over there. But I had to learn that, right? And now I'm looking back because I'm learning and I'm listening. I'm like, where did I do that? You know, I think a sign of a good student as well is somebody who can put themselves in that shoes. Have I done that? Like, I care about communication. When Kyle's talking about things, I'm like, oh shit, guilty.
Yeah.
You know, when people talk about, I saw this meme recently, Kyle's like, 10 traits of a narcissist. And if you are any of these, oh shit, I'm the problem. I'm not saying I'm a narcissist, but to your point, I was seeing where in the past I'm like, oh damn, I'm a female, but there's times that, you know, I want to say something. And it's not just
in a certain sex, but I will say that often humans are very, very smart intellectual beings. There's times where we can talk ourselves and say that we have a problem, and then as we're speaking it, I have to call it full circle moments. If you're just sitting there listening and acknowledging and admiring that person, there's often times where that person will present a problem, And as they speak more, they will solve it in that moment. And you want to know a perfect example of this? Psychologists. Think about what psychologists, psychotherapists, yes, they do provide their input and their analysis and their obviously extensive education, but a lot of times it's like, so tell me the problem. They're great listeners, and that's why people pay them a boatload of money. Because they're phenomenal listeners.
And they ask the right questions.
Correct. And you know this. I know this from when we were working the red carpets. We always tried to think, what is a question that the other 20 studios are going to ask them? Because I'll never forget this. Actually, Larry David, I believe, just brought this up in an interview for about his new release of Curb Your Enthusiasm. And someone asked him a question, and he's like, I've literally answered this 6 times.
Yeah.
So as a reporter, as a journalist, is what we do sometimes with the red carpet with Tiff, is what is that question where it makes them stop and think, go, wow, that is a really good question.
Totally. I am Randall Park. You know who he is, right?
Yep.
I had the chance to interview Randall Park at Sundance. And I didn't realize Randall Park is in the new Marvel movie. I saw him. What's the movie? It's the guy with, anyway, you'll know who he is. Aquaman 2. So, and I was reflecting back on the time that I had him in front of me. And at the time I was working with somebody who was into numerology. And I discovered that, because I was looking into Randall Park. He's an Aries. I'm an Aries. His birthday actually is March 24th and I'm March 25th. And I looked at the signs of an Aries. This is just my thought process, because I'm like, I don't want to be like everybody else. And Randall Park is freaking awesome. Hey, Randall. Hope you're watching. I was like, hey, people who are born on your birthday and whatnot, they often deal with, I said, what's one thing, what is something about you that most people don't know about, right? Like, this is like more like a podcast question, and he's like, wow, good question. And he's like, I'm scared. I get nervous. I get really like lonely. I have a lot of fears, right? So I asked him about this being misunderstood. I asked him another question that I knew was synonymous to his birthday. I was working with a birthday coach, and he was like, "Oh my God, I wish I had more time with you. Like you were asking." I asked him things that stumped him, but it was also very deep, right? I wasn't asking him about the movie, because we all know the movie. We all seen the movie. I want to know about you, the person, the actor. What is it that nobody knows about, right? And when leaders speak, and this is a really interesting topic, maybe for a different day. What's the fine line between understanding Kyle at work and knowing Kyle's home situation and family? Like, where do you draw that line? Because even for my the startup that I'm with, One Click, shout out to my One Click family, we're not a traditional startup. Our communication, our style, our cultural environment is that we are family, and we know each other as family. We know their struggles. We know their life history. What bonds us. This is not common in corporate world, and I'm not saying that it should be, because if you're the head of 1,000 employees, there's no way that you can know 1,000 employees. So as part of that leadership conflict sometimes, not being clear about the lines, right? Because in some workplaces, you're not allowed to date your peers, or you're not allowed to date up, you got to leave the job or something. Have you run into that?
Oh, yeah. And again, talk about a good question, because it forces the person to stop and think, as opposed to just say the words that come right out of your mouth. And before I answer that question, this is critically important as well. So many people are reactive versus responsive when it comes to communication. They're just
I knew
like,
that would come up.
I'm gonna, and I'm like, did you even think about your response? So like, I often tell people, reaction comes from a place of emotion, responsive comes from a place of analytics. So if I was to react in an anger, that's an emotional.
Right.
If I was to respond and pause and be calm, that works really well in negotiations, is you're using your analytical and you can use your brain. Now, to answer your question, it's playing that fine line, but I also caution people. How do you show up on social media? How do you show up in the personal world? Are you a living testament to what you do at work versus what you do at social media versus what you do at home? Now, you can have different personas, which is cool.
You've met all of mine.
But ultimately, and again, there's certain things that shouldn't be posted online,
Sure.
in my opinion.
I agree.
There's certain things that should not be brought up in the workplace. And then there's certain things that you need to have those difficult dialogues. But it's how you have them, how you handle the conversation. And as managers, leaders, educators, how do you sympathize with that dialogue?
I love all that. And, you know, I'm short on time. I think we got a ton of information. So, Kyle, how do we get you? What's the plan? Like, what's your Instagram?
Yeah.
How do we get a hold of you if we want to book you for something?
So it's Kyle Guthro, KyleGuthro. At Kyle Guthro, I'm the same handle on all socials.
And LinkedIn?
LinkedIn, yeah, it's just Kyle Guthro. I'm not very active on LinkedIn. I do have to get better. But I'm more active on social media, on Instagram.
And your brand new website is launching soon.
Which you're helping me with. Yes,
Yeah,
it's, it is
launching.
KyleGuthro.com. So.
Exactly. Well, you guys, it's Carmelia Ray. It's always a pleasure to hang out with Kyle. Now that he sees more things.
Yeah, more toys.
More toys.
Studio
Next
stuff.
time you come, there'll even be more toys in a different background, and we'll go sit somewhere else. And we have a green screen.
Yeah.
So we could be in a spaceship or on the beach.
There we go.
There we go. Thanks, guys. I
All
hope
right.
you learned a lot about communication, and we'll be back another time.
See you guys.